destroy our planet and melt its crust, so this really wouldn't matter anyway. But the theory also fails to account for why the two sides of the moon are so different. We're going to soon discuss that. Why are the two sides of the moon so completely different? We'll get to that in just a second here. So there's actually a number of other issues with this theory. They're too numerous to go into here, but basically this is what's in vogue now, but it doesn't explain it. I mean, it just doesn't. So in understanding moon origin problems, one expert made a telling little joke about it in an article from Nature magazine in 1997. And this article was titled, "It's Not Easy to Make a Moon." And in the article it states, the best explanation for the moon was observational error. The moon does not exist. So from a secular evolutionary position, they can't explain the origin of the moon. So yeah, perhaps we're mistaken. It's a figment of our imagination. Maybe it's not even there at all, right? I know this is just a bit of a joke, but these kinds of jokes really aren't particularly funny to the evolutionists because they don't have an answer. And another one named David Hughes in Nature magazine from 1987 said this, in astronomical terms, therefore the moon must be classed as a well-known object, but astronomers still have to admit shamefacedly that they have little idea where it came from. This is particularly embarrassing because the solution of this mystery was billed as one of the major goals, or the main goals of the US lunar exploration program. So I guess if that was their main goal, to figure this out with the US lunar exploration program, I guess it would be a little embarrassing to have spent this many years on it, trying to figure this out, and billions upon billions of dollars trying to answer this question. And so I think at the very least you should be at least a little embarrassed that you don't have the answer to this. This is one of your main stated goals. And on November 10th in 1971, Dr. Harold Urey, now he's a Nobel Prize winning chemist and lunar scientist, stated, I do not know the origin of the moon. I'm not sure of my own or any other models. I'd lay odds against any of the models proposed being correct. So it always fascinates me how these experts can recognize the overwhelming problems with their theories, but they're seemingly totally unwilling to consider the answer or consider the option that there was a creator and a designer. Whoa, what happened there? All right, I don't know what that means.
Trying to project, you probably picked the wrong.
Oh boy, all right, well let's
Kick him out, go ahead.
let's get that out of here. Well, okay, another problem here. Okay, star, Windows K. Maybe that will get us back. We're going to try to connect here. Maybe I might need your technical expertise. Oh, there we go. Maybe that's
Just retake over, right?
I'm going to have to give him a hard time for this one.
Probably picked the wrong screen.
All right, okay. I hate it when that happens. All right, go back to current slide. Let's re-establish our, there we go, okay. All right, so there's where we were. He says, I don't know the origin of the moon. I'm not sure of any of my own or other models. I'd lay odds against any of the models proposed being correct. And of course, this always fascinates me how the experts, don't even consider the option that there might be a creator or designer. Another expert made the following statement in the International Geology Review in 1988. He says, the origin of the moon is still unsolved. Okay, I guess it is. International Geology Review sounds like the type of publication you might read when you're having a hard time falling asleep. I mean, I would think that that's something that would cause you to fall asleep pretty quick. But the origin of the moon apparently is still unresolved. And, the evolutionists say they have all the answers, but apparently they kind of don't. And actually, it's pretty simple to answer this question. Where did the moon come from? Genesis provides us all the answers we need, right? We're told that God created the moon on day 4 of creation week. So, problem solved. There's also a heat problem with the moon, too. Assuming the moon is billions of years old, researchers find that the moon remains unexpectedly hot, measuring a very high heat amount still emanating from its surface. And we also find a liquid core, a small liquid core inside the moon. So how did it get that way? So we're going to talk about that in a few slides as well. So now what I want to do now is turn our focus to the strange features on the moon. Once again, evolutionary theory only makes wild guesses that don't stand up to scientific observation and logic. And we'll also see that other creation-based explanations also fail to account for what these unusual features are. How did the moon get to be the way it is? But once again, we'll see that hydroplate theory easily explains these unusual surface features that result as a result of the moon being bombarded by the ejected material, this high velocity debris and water and gases that were ejected from the Earth during the bursting forth of the Great Deep during the beginning of the Great Flood. And this single event here will explain the moon's unusual surface features, or topography, as we see today. And topography basically is the study of the arrangement of the physical features of an area of land. So we're going to talk about the topography here of the moon a little bit. So let's look at the moon's surface. Here's the view we always see from Earth, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, right? You see this virtually every day. So due to something called tidal locking, we always see what is called the near side of the moon. And the opposite side of the moon, which is termed the far side, which not the dark side. You're thinking Pink Floyd here. I know what you're thinking. It's not the dark side. Depends on which way the sun's shining here. But the far side of the moon never faces us. So the smooth dark spots on the Earth's side of the moon were once thought to be liquid seas, and so they were named Maria by early astronomers who mistakenly thought these were bodies of water on the moon. And Maria is the Latin word for seas, and so that started and the name stuck. We still have it. So we obviously know that these Maria are not seas at all. There's no large bodies of water on the moon. And the moon's surface also appears to have been peppered with impacts, as if being shot by a giant shotgun, both on the near side, but especially on the far side, which we don't see from the Earth. So if we look at the far side of the moon, here's a picture of the far side, we see that it's heavily cratered. It's quite different from the near side. And there's only a couple of dark spots here, and much, much smaller than what's on the other side. And while the Earth side is relatively smooth, within the sections of the Maria, so we'll see that the Maria was actually pretty smooth inside, the far side is heavily cratered and has many, many small impacts. So here's a picture of both sides, side by side here. Again, you can see the near side on the left and the far side on the right, and they're completely different. So can this dramatic difference be explained? Obviously, it seems the moon has been dramatically impacted at some point in the past. Okay? Something's hit the moon either once or many times. So something's got to be an answer for this. So now, Ronald Samek, in an article in 2008, in a journal titled The Origin of Lunar Maria, he wrote, "I conclude from the distribution of true Maria, except for one or two notable exceptions on the far side," so we'll see there's a couple of very small ones on the far side, the moon, that impactors hit preferentially on one side of the moon, the side facing Earth. So again, we do see a few dark spots on the far side, but nothing like what's on the near side. So here's an image you see of the face of the moon as we view it from Earth, from the near side, on the left, and on the right, this is an image from the near side also, showing concentrations of what are called mass and gravity, with the red areas being the highest concentrations of mass and gravity. So you see big spots and smaller red spots, which are the highest concentrations of mass and gravity. So in astronomy, astrophysics and geophysics, mass concentrations are abbreviated as something called mascons. And this is a region of a planet or moon's crust that contains large, prominent, and dense concentrations of mass. This, again, is the face of the moon that always faces the Earth. And so the larger concentration of mass would produce gravitational anomalies due to the concentrations of mass. So in these red areas, actually the gravitational forces are greater, slightly, not by a lot, but slightly greater. So, so these red areas are unusually strong areas of mass and gravity. And you see that there are 5 rather large areas and many other much smaller red areas as well. But the moon is the most gravitationally lumpy major body known in the solar system. So again, what explains this? How did this get to be this way? Within the largest mascons here, the largest red areas, the force of gravity varies by as much as 0.5% higher than in the non-mass-con areas. So something caused this. So this is an indication I think the moon must have received 5 extremely powerful impacts in these 5 large red areas, along with numerous other smaller impacts as shown in the smaller red areas. So how likely would you think that this would have all occurred just on the near side, the side that faces the Earth? How rare would it be that you would expect 5 very large impacts so close to each other, unless these impactors were traveling on similar paths with similar trajectories and struck the moon at about the same time? So again, the major question is why? If we see all these mass cons that impacted the Earth, why are they all concentrated on the Earth side of the moon? I'm glad you asked, because we're going to answer that question. So, and also, could several prominent celestial objects impact the moon while at the same time miss hitting the Earth? So the Earth is much bigger, of course, and has more gravitational pull to it. How did these things hit the Earth side of the moon but miss hitting the Earth? And there's secular theories, of course, about the moon's unusual features. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're a little short of time as it is, but to account for this lunar disfigurement, evolutionists will hold to some fantastical idea of early and late bombardments that can account for these features. But given the vastness of space again, how could the moon be struck so many times? Was it from asteroids and comets that they also can't explain the origins of? We talked earlier about there's no secular evolutionary answer for how the origins of comets and asteroids. Once again, many, many unanswered questions. And also, other creationist theories regarding the moon's features fail to answer these questions as well. I'll just go through a couple of them quickly here, but a guy named Wayne Spencer, in an article from the Proceedings for the International Conference on Creationism, stated these events related to the fall recorded in Genesis 3, which set into motion naturalistic events that triggered a later bombardment. But his article doesn't take into account or doesn't account for the source of the bombardment. He doesn't tell us where this came from. He just states we don't know how the impact and bombardment took place. It doesn't provide any answers for where this came from. And then also in 2012, an article in the Journal of Creation titled "The Impact Flood Submodel, Dealing with the Issues," Michael Ord stated that there must have been a bombardment event that struck the moon. However, this article explores the idea that there was some kind of supernatural protection to the Earth at the time during this bombardment. So somehow the moon got slammed, but the Earth was spared. And he's saying, well, this must have been God invoking some kind of a miracle to protect the Earth. There's no miracle like this mentioned in Scripture, of course. And the majority of creation-based organizations today hold to a theory called catastrophic plate tectonics. And this relies on a lot of unmentioned miracles and a lot of technical problems that we'll explore in a later class. We'll get to that primarily when we talk about the creation of the mid-oceanic ridges, when as the flood continues. But one of the key issues is there isn't any mechanism from catastrophic plate tectonics that provides a source of the bombardment of the moon. And there's many other issues that we won't go into for now. Again, I'll plan on covering that when we get into the later classes. So it certainly appears that the near side of the moon has been dramatically impacted. Could this be, again, from objects not originating from the Earth that just happened to strike the moon on the near side that faces the Earth but not strike the Earth itself? This seems to be kind of unlikely. So if we see these impactors coming along here, well, the Earth's going to shield them. This isn't to scale, of course, but the Earth would shield somewhat the moon from being struck. If we now, this doesn't take into account any gravitational forces of the Earth either. So as we take now into account the gravitational forces of the Earth, we advance the slide here now, impactors that come along, a lot of them we actually pulled into the Earth as well. So this would have widened out quite a bit. So would look more like this. So we would see some that might come in and hit the Earth, and some that would be orbit the Earth and get whipped out into space but not hit the moon. So the moon actually is kind of somewhat shielded by the Earth. So what is the answer then? Okay, I think you probably know where we're going with this, right? I see the way you're smiling and nodding your head. So hydroplate theory proposes that moons, craters, mass cons, unexpected heat, and remnant water in ice craters and the unique topography differences between the moon and the far side are best explained by the recent bombardment of the moon as experienced by a result of the flood as materials were launched from the Earth from the fountains of the great deep. As you watch this video here, you'll see ejecta coming from the Earth. You'll see the moon's sphere of influence in yellow there, and some of these impactors are going to actually hit the moon. Some of them will be drawn into the moon, some will be direct hits, some will be drawn into the moon because of the moon's gravitational forces. And remember, earlier we discussed the breaking up of the fountains in the great deep would have accelerated rocks and debris and material away from the Earth at a tremendous amount of speed. So in order to reach escape velocity, in other words, something would reach a high enough velocity where it would actually be ejected away from the Earth, it has to be at a speed of around 25,000 miles per hour or greater. This works out to be 7 miles per second. So that's pretty fast, right? Moving pretty quick. But according to calculations done by Dr. Walt Brown, the combined forces that would have occurred during the flood would have released so much energy that the speeds actually achieved would have been significantly greater than 7 miles per second. He estimates it could have been as much as around 32 miles per second, over 4 times faster than 7 miles per second. So I think we can be pretty confident that the escape velocity would have been easily achieved in order to push these things out into space. And this speed at 7 miles per second is about 10 times the speed of a speeding bullet fired from an AR-15 rifle. So it's hard for us to imagine this kind of energy release. In fact, it boggles the mind. But combining the intense amount of pressure due to the weight of the crust on top of the subterranean chambers and the waters below being at this supercritical state, and also the massive amount of drop in pressure and temperature as the crust opens up, and also nuclear forces from the fluttering in the crust, which would have created massive amounts of electrical currents. We'll talk about this later too. And also there's radioactivity. There would have been tremendous forces to achieve this and launch rocks and boulders and organic matter, which was found on asteroids, right, and comets. How did it get there, right? So this would have been enough to have caused this. So I'm going to just backspace this one time here so you can see this animation run once again. Oops. Now it should run. There we go. So now we see this ejecta material coming from the Earth. This indicates the crack in the crust, the fountains of the great deep, shooting all this material out into outer space. Pretty amazing stuff. Now this would have taken about 5 days, they estimate, from the time the material left the Earth to when it struck the moon. Now, we'll see too that these 5 major impacts that we saw, 3 of them are in basically a straight line with each other. So it could be that there was maybe one rock that would have split apart that would have hit the moon maybe. But we just have to kind of speculate on some of this. But so once this material is ejected out in outer space beyond the Earth's gravitational sphere, some of it, and estimated by Dr. Brown to have been about 1.2% of the total material ejected from the Earth, some of it would have headed directly to the Earth, or to the moon, I mean, and struck it, and with tremendous force. And this ejected debris would then now primarily hit the leading face of the moon at the time of its impact. And this would have caused this moon to slow its rotational speed down to where it becomes tidally locked with the Earth. So now we only see the one face facing us now. So there's laws of physics that this type of an impact would have actually slowed down the rotation of the moon. So I think pre-flood here, the moon actually probably did rotate on its axis. So we did see both sides. But of course the moon would have been much smoother than that before the flood. So this concept is called tidal locking. So this impact would have changed the moon's inertia enough and caused it to oscillate or wobble, which is a motion known as libration, making it appear to rock slightly. And before the flood, obviously it would have looked much different. It would have looked pretty smooth, probably. It's also likely that one side of the moon did not always face the Earth as it does today. So as we see tidal locking here, we'll see that the moon going around the Earth, it actually does rotate on its axis. It just rotates at the same amount of rate that it actually goes around the Earth. So now that's why we always see the same face of the Earth, of the moon always facing the Earth. And this bombardment, probably happened, just about 5 or so days after the flood. And we'll see as the moon is slammed with so much material, it'll eject out other rocks and debris out into the moon's orbit. And also traces of water have been found all over the moon as well. So 3 different spacecraft have taken measurements of the moon, including this infrared image on the right, and all have found traces of water all over the moon. So according to secular models, comets would have done this. They every so often would deposit water on the moon, but this water should evaporate faster than comets deposit it. So why is it the moon has so much water and ice remaining? We do see ice in especially the dark crater areas that never see any sunlight. They'll freeze and never thaw, so they'll remain there. And this was also predicted by hydroplate theory. Again, the sign of a very good theory is that predictions that you make will be found to be correct, and this has. So now you can explain what the near side of the moon looks like. It would have impacted the moon in such a way that you would have this massive strike, and now a lot of debris would have been kicked up from the moon as this happened. Now we'll look at the far side of the moon. How did the far side of the moon get to look the way it is? So in this animation here, we see primarily this faces the face of the Earth, and we hits the moon, and it creates massive amounts of melting because of the inertia. And a lot of this would have gone deep into the moon and would have started to actually melt some of the moon's interior. So we'll back that up one time so you can see this again, because it goes by kind of quick. So this would have brought lava flows to the surface, and these lava flows became the maria on the Earth side, the side that we see. So some of the rocks kicked up from the main impacts would have had enough velocity that would have escaped the moon and probably could have even possibly hit the Earth, but smaller, lower velocity debris lifted from the surface of the near side as a result of these heavy impacts that didn't escape the moon's gravitational sphere of influence would have pulled it back to the surface along very random and many different trajectories. So this produced secondary craters all around the moon's surface, especially on the far side. But we also see this on the near side as well. This would have occurred to impact events that would have occurred likely for days, weeks, or perhaps even years after this initial impact. So some of these impacts would have been massive enough to have penetrated deep into the moon, causing deep internal shifting, causing the production of and releasing of heat, causing the rock to melt or produce magma that would have sank toward the center of the moon below something called the crossover depth. So the crossover depth is an area of depth that molten rock, because of the weight above it, pressing down on it, would actually compress the molten rock to be more compact, therefore denser. And below that depth, and we'll talk about this as we talk about the Earth in future class here, but below that depth, it can't rise. It actually sinks because it's more dense than what's around it. So it sinks now, and this melting causes the moon to actually become fluid, this fluid outer core. So now it produces the melting inside the moon. And this was confirmed in 2011, that the moon is actually like this inside. So Dr. Brown had predicted this prior to 2011. Again, a good prediction that came true. The other issue too is that the core has not solidified or cooled down yet. And this indicates that the moon is not billions of years old or even millions of years old. It would have cooled off well before now. Another indication that these long ages are not correct. Some of this molten rock would have flowed out or spilled out onto the surface of the moon on the near side, filling or partially filling the Maria areas that we see on the near side of the moon. And it's exactly what we see on the near side of the moon. The Maria areas, of course, that were once thought to be seas, were actually lava beds produced during and after the bombardment that came from the Earth. And one more aspect of the moon that would have affected the moon as it was bombarded, before we move on here. If only 1.22% of the debris launched from the Earth by the fountains of the Great Deep, the moon's circular orbit would have actually become slightly elliptical as we see it today. So the moon isn't perfect. This is greatly exaggerated here, so you can see this. It's not nearly as elongated there. But the moon at perigee, which is its closest distance to the Earth, is 225,309 miles. At apogee, it's 251,904 miles. So it's not quite circular. It's a difference of about 11.6%. So this is kind of significant in that this kind of impact force that we're looking at here, using well-known laws of physics, would have made the orbit slightly elliptical. So the question here is, was this totally circular prior to the flood? And I think there's some indications that it would have been. This would have affected the length of the lunar month, as well as the time it takes for the moon to orbit the Earth. And many ancient cultures worldwide had in their cultures a 360-day year and a 30-day lunar month. But according to Dr. Brown's calculation, if only 1.22% had impacted the moon, it would have changed this 30-day lunar month to a present 29.53-day lunar month. So it would have changed it. And we do see many ancient calendars that were based on this 30-day month and 360-day year, which would have provided a perfect way to keep time. Pretty interesting. But this flood had so many aspects that changed so much of what happened. It's just hard to overestimate or overstate what effects this had, how devastating and how catastrophic an event this was. Could the moon at one time had a perfectly circular or very good orbital path rather than the slightly elliptical orbit we see? I think these are all interesting questions. And Dr. Brown explores this rather extensively in his book. I don't have time to go through it here, but it's very interesting. See the section titled, Did the Pre-Flood Earth Have a 30-Day Lunar Month? For more details on this. Pretty amazing stuff. So in conclusion on this section, there are many key lines of evidence that should convince us, I think, that the hydroplate theory answers these many major questions regarding the moon's unusual features, where again, secular evolutionary theory only makes guesses and speculations, and other flood models fail to adequately explain these unusual features. And hopefully I'm thinking that every time you look at the moon, I want you to think of this. Think of the moon. How did it get the way it is? What happened? Was it impacted? And this is a consequence of what happened during the Great Flood. And one other little last closing note here too. Mark your calendars for April 13th, 2029. Not just because it's 2 days before tax day, okay? I know everybody I'm getting panicky now because it's close to tax day, right? But this is the date where a near-Earth asteroid named Apophis, A-P-O-P-H-I-S, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, is a potentially hazardous asteroid that will pass very close to Earth on this date of April 13th, 2029. It will come within about 20,000 miles of our planet's surface. And that's closer than many of the satellites that orbit the Earth today. It's around 1,100 to 1,200 feet in diameter. This is a pretty good-sized asteroid. And this asteroid passes directly through Earth's orbital path just 20 minutes after Earth has passed by. So in other words, the Earth passes by 20 minutes later. This asteroid passes right through where the Earth was 20 minutes earlier. Now they've ruled out that this is a threat to the Earth. But if you recall, we talked about the meteor that hit Russia in 2023, the Chelyabinsk meteor. It was only 60 feet in diameter. And we looked at the damage that did. I mean, it was a huge amount of damage. Imagine the damage that 1,100 to 1,200 foot in diameter asteroid could do. Pretty incredible. So it bodes that this could be a big threat to us at some point in the future. Is this the way God destroys the Earth? I don't know. But it seems to be a possibility. So that concludes this part of the class. I want to save what we're going to do in the next part until we start again. The next part of the class we'll pick up in July. I need time to prepare. And at that time, we're going to start by discussing the frozen animals, the mammoths. We're also going to look at great amounts of sediments that are brought up to the surface of the planet, the surface of the Earth. We're going to look at that sediments now being in water, trapping billions upon billions of animals and plants in the fossil record. We'll see it developing into fossil graveyards and polystrate fossils that begin to form that are all indications of a great flood. And then we'll look into rapid continental drift that will happen as the mid-oceanic ridges form. One of the most amazing features on the planet. If you look at the ocean floor, a map of the ocean floor, you'll see a huge mountain chain that runs right down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and wraps around the whole Earth. It's pretty amazing stuff. At this point, just would appreciate if you have any questions or any criticisms, comments, suggestions. I mean, I hope you're getting something out of this class. I have found that discussing scientific things with people really opens up doors with people. I constantly, I've been talking to people. Just yesterday, I talked to some customers of mine that were unfamiliar with this. They're already Christians, but I started to discuss this with them. They're absolutely fascinated by it. And another good friend of mine a couple weeks ago, same thing. So I think this is a great way to open up and talk to people about the Bible and talk to people about creation science, that this is such a great tool that we can use. As Romans 1:20 says, it talks about God's amazing qualities can be seen through what has been made. So I think God is telling us, use what I've created here. Nothing else can do this. Nothing else can explain where all this came from. And therefore becomes a very positive, very powerful tool.
It gives more proof. People say, well, you're just living by faith. It's like, no, we have our proofs.
Yeah, we have lots.
Gives,
Yeah.
More of
Yeah, you have to have a lot more faith to believe in evolution. You really do. Yeah, you have to have a lot more faith. I don't have that much faith. All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Again, any questions or anything? Or any comments, criticisms? I mean, I'd appreciate any feedback you might have. Yeah.
Where are the 360-day calendars coming from? So those are ancient cultures that recorded this, and the flood came and destroyed them.
It actually continued after the flood, too. Yeah. Yeah.
Taken time for
I didn't take the time to stick a lot of that in here, but ancient Babylonians, and there was Chinese, there was quite a few. I just didn't think I have enough time to get into it here, but there's a lot of them.
It took time for it to slow down.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
initial-
Right, it wouldn't have happened right away. But I think as they found that, hey, this calendar doesn't line up anymore, they started inserting extra days into the year. And we'll also find, too, that when we get to this material that was ejected out of the Earth and the melting of the interior of the Earth, it would have compacted the Earth somewhat. And as you compact the Earth, you'll find that it'll actually increase the rotational speed of the Earth. So it's kind of like when a figure skater is skating and then they have their arms out and they start pulling their arms in. What do? They start spinning faster and faster, right? So as your center of gravity gets closer and closer, it increases your spin rate. So we'll see that the Earth increases in speed, giving us now 365.25 days per year, rather than what I think was 360 days per year at one time. Oh, pretty interesting stuff. We'll get to that. So. All right, well, thank you very much. You bet.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.